expensive its age. It's not going to last as long if you gas a battery. But the biggest things that I relate to is it's heart attack for a battery. I mean, it really is. It's like, and so if you want a battery to last longer, you simply don't jump them. If you jump them, you will shorten life by at least a year. So I get a lot of people go, well, what can I do without spending any money? Okay, keep the battery charged up. If you're going to just use the premise that you can start the motor or drive to keep your battery charged up, you got to do it long enough that you fully charge your battery. Okay, not partially charge your battery. You want to fully charge your battery, or it doesn't help. It's not good for the battery to keep it. You're not. Now it might be good for the motor and all that kind of stuff. That's great, but you're not going to prolong the life of the battery. Does anybody else want to insert or a little flyer? So let me get into it, and feel free to ask any questions that are pertinent to your own situation. But people quite often come in and go, oh, there's a whole bunch of different type of batteries I can buy. What kind do I need? And do I need to spend the money on these new fancier batteries and stuff like that? So let me tell you my opinions on batteries, basically. I mean, I've got a couple AGM batteries in a couple of my cars. Oh, by the way, maybe I should also explain how I got into the battery charger business. I've been in the computer business for 40 years, and I made big power supplies for computers and big RAID systems, hard drive systems. I've been doing that for 40 years. Fortunate enough to make some money at that business, and my passion is cars. And so I've got a bunch of cars. If you've got a bunch of cars, you've got a bunch of batteries that are going dead on you and stuff. And I had, when battery tenders came out 30 years ago, I bought them. And I tell you what, I have nothing bad to say about my competitor. They were the first guys out there that made something, and I thought that was pretty cool. I put them on my cars. How I got into this business was just about 10 years ago. I had 30 cars in my little collection, and I had tenders on everything and stuff. And batteries still died, and the problem with the tender is it had a green light on it, but it doesn't necessarily mean the battery's good. You can, tenders, the green light doesn't mean good, and the red light doesn't mean bad. That just means that with it on there, plugged into the wall, if the voltage shows, 13 volts or 13 point something, 13.6, the green light will stay on. If the battery goes bad, it just stays on anyway. It doesn't care and stuff. And so, so I was replacing batteries still with tenders on it. And the thing that, the straw that broke the camel's back is we were taking a tour on a Sunday, my wife and I and stuff, and she's getting the picnic ready, and I got the green light, and it was a Viper. I've got old cars too, but just so happens it was a Viper tour. If anybody's owned an older Viper, the battery is behind the rear wheel. So changing your battery out real quick is not an easy process. It is, and first of all, I don't like getting down on the ground because of my weight and stuff, and I'm here with this stupid, and it took me a couple hours to get the battery changed out, and I said, you know what, when I get back home, I'm going to look at these chargers I got. I had a variety of different types, and I'm going to make something better, and that's how I got into the battery charger business and stuff. I probably know way more than I ever want to know about bad batteries, and it's just one of those things. But if you live with batteries, and we seem to be living with batteries, and there are all types of new batteries, the more you know about something, the better off you are. I've replaced batteries to find out it was a voltage regulator. It's the easiest thing to replace. The battery goes bad, you think, that's what it is. It's a battery. But it doesn't mean it's a battery if you're not charging and stuff. So anyway, this is not a sales pitch for my battery chargers, but that's how I got into those. Now let's get back to what I was talking about originally, and that is different types of batteries. What do you buy? In my opinion, standard lead acid batteries are still the best bang for the buck. They are just simply the best bang for the buck. Now you got to realize that there's only 4 companies making them, really. It's not like in the olden days when I was a kid, there was probably 200 or 300 companies making them. And when you saw different labels, they were made by different people. Today you see different labels and they're made by the same factory. They just are spec'd differently for whoever wants to come in and buy them from these different companies. So you're not buying necessarily different batteries are made by different people. They may be the same company making them. But standard, good old-fashioned lead-acid batteries, if you take care of them, are great. One of the things I do when I go into a store is I got a little voltmeter with me. You take a voltmeter, or we have a little tester built in our things. I test the battery for voltage because I don't care. I don't know when they put those stickers on when you buy them. They could put them on whenever they feel like, and I don't really necessarily trust them. They probably put the old, if they're like me and you're a retailer, you put the old inventory in front. Well, I don't want to buy a battery, so I look for the highest voltage. And the second thing is, if I'm buying brands, you look for the highest amount of weight. You want the heaviest battery you can buy in whatever class you're buying. It means it's got more lead in it. And let me just tell you how they cost reduce batteries. They make the plates so thin today that they're designed to last only a couple, 3 years. And so the lead plates can wear out, where we never used to have that. Plate always, but now the plates are so close to each other. So the heavier the battery, you're getting more battery for your thing. So even if you just lift it up, it just, it's good to do that. But let's get on to different batteries. The newest thing that's happened, or not the newest thing, but the thing that's happened in the last 20 years and stuff are called AGM batteries. And I'm assuming everybody here heard of them. Let me tell you how they came to life. They weren't made for cars. They were originally made for emergency lights and medical equipment. The reason they were made for emergency lights and medical equipment is those batteries sit around a long time and they don't move. And 20 years ago, the battery chargers were very simple trickle chargers, but when I was mentioning that battery stratified, that the water goes to the top and the sulfuric acid goes to the bottom, well, those batteries, they were using lead acid, they would separate, so that you'd have to change the batteries out every 3 to 6 months. Well, they wanted something better, so they come out with, the original word for it was gel batteries. Okay? AGM batteries are the same thing. It's just how they go about holding the sulfuric acid and the water together so they don't separate. So they came out with, and AGM stands for absorbed glass mat. What they're saying is, instead of just water and sulfuric acid, where you got a wet battery, they call it wet battery, they created a gel. And now they created an absorbed glass mat between the plates, which holds those things together. It doesn't let them separate. They still separate. It takes about a year. But if you're going to store a battery and you're not going to use it, and you're not going to plug it into a charger, an AGM battery is a better solution. AGM batteries also, like the Optimus and stuff, a lot of customers have Optimus, are better for vibration. But short of the vibration and the fact that you don't use the battery and you want it to last, and you're going to leave it sit and not going to plug it in, or you can't plug it in, AGM batteries are twice as much money. And so dollars and cents wise, I've got a couple cars. And the other one, let me give them another point. They have more amp hours usually, about 100 more amp hours. So if you've got a high performance car, I've got two Optima batteries. If you got a high performance car, then you might want that. But other than those reasons, unless you're just burning money, good old fashioned lead acid battery is still the best bang for the buck that are out there stuff. So now, deep cycle versus starting batteries. That's another question that people have. Okay? And most everybody understands that a deep cycle battery is slightly different. What a deep cycle battery is designed to do is be able to go down in voltage lower and not get hurt. A starting battery wants to stay above 11.7 volts always. And 11.7 volts sounds like it's still pretty good, but I tell you what, 11.7 volts may not start a car. A battery's got to be in the 12 volt range for most cars. 11.7, and modern cars with electronics, they may not fire at down there and stuff. So when you get a battery below 11.7, as far as functionality is concerned, it's not a very good battery. I mean, it's too low to really do you any good. So they come out with the deep cycle batteries because what they're intending that you're going to do with this thing is you're going to want to run your lights or your load or whatever the item is for as long as you possibly can. So the voltage will go down below 11.7, but most 12 volt items will run down to around 10 or 9.5, and so you've got maybe 2 times the storage capacity that you would have out of a normal battery. So that's why they've got deep cycles. Now let's just talk about the 2 things that you look for. There's a thing called amp hours, and there's a thing called cold cranking amps. And batteries are rated in both. And the cold cranking amps obviously is exactly what it sounds like. The amps that a battery can produce at freezing. Okay? The higher, the stronger the battery. Doesn't mean that the battery is going to last longer as far as what you pull off of it. The amp hours can be small or big. It's just how much push it can give you to start a motor. Well, if you've got high performance, you want a lot of push, you go for a higher cold cranking battery. If you've got a deep cycle battery, then you'd be more concerned with the amp hours. 100 amp hours, you know, there's 1 amp for 100 hours and stuff. 10 amps for 10 hours. It's got more storage capabilities than, let's say, a 50 or a 20 or a smaller battery. And so for when you're designing something around that, you want to go for the maximum amount of amp hours if you're talking about a trailer or motorhome or anything like that kind of stuff. Does everybody understand those two concepts and stuff? If you've got cars, we've all been there and stuff. Cold cranking amps is usually the thing.
We back up a minute. We've got standard lead acid, maintenance-free lead acid. What's the difference on them? We don't see the removable caps on them.
Yeah, I mean, really, the maintenance-free means they're vented slightly different. Okay, so most batteries today are called maintenance-free. And even, there's still holes. Even if they put a label over the holes, those holes are still there. You can actually put, two of our markets that we do really good in are Florida and Arizona, okay? And because you're torturing your battery when you're at 120 or 130 degrees in your garage, and they evaporate. You know, so people go, well, what else can I do for keeping my batteries alive longer? I go move to Hawaii. They love Hawaii because you've got 70 to 80 degrees and you've got humidity, so you're not going to get evaporation, and that's how to make a battery last a long time. Keep it between 70 and 80. Well, that's not the world and stuff. So in Arizona, batteries die prematurely because of evaporation and heat. Well, there's nothing wrong with if you've got a battery and you can see the caps where the caps will come off, or you can easily get the label on. Filling it back up with water, distilled water, of course, but you can do it, and you can make your batteries last longer if you want to. So there's certainly nothing wrong with doing that as far as I'm concerned. Now, the other thing that kills batteries prematurely is cold. And what happens with cold is when they're not being used. And the reason that in storage, if you've got a place in the cold, and we have a place up in Michigan, we have a place in California, the batteries in California inherently last longer because they hate to be brought down to 20 below. Because if your battery has been sitting there and it's not on something that's exercising, your cars don't have that effect. But if your batteries are sitting there, the water is at the top. It's separated. It's it's stratified. Well, and water, as it freezes, expands. And even if it doesn't crack the outside shell, your plates, the lead plates are so thin that they're doing this as it thaws and as it freezes. And so what you end up with is you end up with cracks. And even if the crack doesn't kill the battery right away, it will kill it in a short amount of time. And so that's another thing about batteries. If you're in super cold and you don't have a choice, you've got to drive that battery. And if you don't drive that battery, you should definitely look into something that exercises the battery while you're not using it. If you don't, they will die prematurely and stuff. Again, but we're up in our places in the UP and stuff, and I keep things. Well, this last winter, one of my barns not heated and stuff. That's where my lawnmower and stuff like that. But I have our units on there, and the exercising that the pulsing does keeps them from freezing. So you want to, if you can.
How does your unit exercise the battery? It draws current and charges both ways? Yeah.
Yeah, discharges and recharges and stuff, and it puts out an ultrasonic pulse. So the ultrasonic pulse, what it does is it repels the sulfur from the walls of the plates. Okay, so it's, matter of fact, how we do it is we reverse the polarity. Which you would normally not be able to do. You blow up a battery, you try to reverse the polarity on it, or if you ever plug your battery backwards, when you're jumping into stuff, you know what I'm talking about. You're hoping for no explosion. And I'll bring you into the last little thing about explosions. I have been privy enough to never have had an explosion myself. Lucky, because sometimes when I wouldn't pay attention, I'd jump cars where, you connect it to the other car first. You should always connect your jumper cables to the car you're jumping, and then go over to the car that you're jumping from, so we don't get sparks at that battery there. Because if you get sparks and you've got any hydrogen gas, it will blow up. And it can happen, and that's usually when it does happen. It doesn't usually happen for the fun of it. It usually happens when you're futzing with it and it needs a spark to set off hydrogen gas. Two things about maintaining batteries too. If you keep the voltage up, you're not going to get as much hydrogen gas. If you keep the level of the battery up, now I'm talking about maintenance or non-maintenance batteries, old-fashioned batteries. If you've got any old-fashioned batteries, you keep them full. Don't let them go down, because if the hydrogen gas gets trapped in the top part of the cavity, that's where the hydrogen gas is hanging out. Also, it's hanging out around the plates and stuff. If you ever wonder why the white stuff on the outside of your battery, where it comes from, that's called hydrogen sulfate. It's the battery. All batteries gas. All batteries will vent. Even AGMs, even though you can turn them upside down and stuff, they have two little holes there. If they get too critical, they will gas instead of blow up and stuff. So the problem with hydrogen sulfate, when the hydrogen's coming out with the sulfur, is they get attracted to the post. They want to just go right there. So if you've got a battery that's you've had a problem with that hydrogen gas, there's no solution really, because it's still going to be attracted, other than keeping the level up high and keeping the dang battery vented. Never, ever put a blanket or something over the top of the battery in storage. Kiss of death, because you're going to try. You want ventilation, and if you got a battery like that, and you're going to store it, leave the hood up a few inches and stuff. Let it breathe, because you'll have a lot less hydrogen sulfate.
We always stick them in a stainless steel box or a plastic box or something.
Well,
That's in that box somewhere.
right. Well, vents are the most important thing to old-fashioned batteries that there are. If you're going to go with non-vented boxes, you're better off with an AGM battery, because it has less venting than a maintenance-free or a maintenance battery. But venting is definitely venting and temperature. I mean, are just really important things. I wrote an article. It's in there on battery explosions and stuff like that. And the guy that I wrote about is a friend of mine. He's up in the Pacific Northwest and stuff, and he had a $2 million Ferrari. And it's you can't really see from the pictures or anything. And he put a blanket over the top of it, and then he took the blanket off, and he put jumper cables on it, and just went right to the battery, and this sucker blew. And he was lucky. I mean, he wore glasses, and that was good. But it just, when that happens, what you want to do, obviously, get to a doctor if it's you. But if it's your car, wash it down big time. Use as much water, because you'll dilute, but if you don't dilute that sulfuric acid, it eats through everything. It'll eat through your shirt, it'll eat through, as a matter of fact, bring me to another thing. I think these guys have stopped doing this, but for a while there was some guy that should be in jail advertising that you can restore any battery made. Just give him the $39 or $49, and he will tell you how to, the miracle way to restore your batteries. Full of hogwash, totally full of hogwash. And people paid him and stuff, and maybe our government did something good there and it stopped him. He's telling people to take the sulfuric acid out of a battery and you could clean it out. Nobody in their right mind plays with a battery unless you're set up for it. I mean, it's terrible because it's dangerous. It's sulfuric acid. It's called acid. It'll eat right through your clothes and your skin and stuff. And so who in this world, other than a company that can, does that for a living, who in this world would possibly want to do that? This guy was, anyway, I'm just thankful he's not telling people to do that anymore. The just simple good maintenance on your stuff and taking care of your batteries and servicing them periodically will get you a couple more years of life out of your batteries. Just that simple amount of stuff is important. So, any questions or any stories? I always like to hear stories. Anybody have a horror story? It always makes everybody else feel better when you tell them.
I've witnessed a few battery explosions. Usually the aftermath, because I had a service station and I'd go to tow in cars or somebody tried to jumpstart their car, and the paint was already shot. The guy was in the hospital. parts of plastic batteries were all over the place.
Yeah, I understand, it sounds like a loudest boom you could ever have.
And I have also witnessed one in my own garage where a kid that worked for me was gonna charge a battery and said, there's a light bulb inside this battery. I said, what?
Get away from me.
And, and he actually hooked up the battery charger and it was glowing. I'll just unplug it from the wall, get away from it. And it was too late, it just popped.
Right.
Bounced off the floor, split the case open, acid all over the place. But something in that battery became a filament, no longer a conductor,
And woof.
and it was glowing.
Right.
But it didn't, nobody got hurt at least, but
Right.
it was frightening to see from 20 feet away while I was moving towards the cold plug.
Well,
Yeah, there's a light bulb inside this battery.
No, there isn't.
It's a fuse.
And he was lucky, yeah, well, there, yeah, it's just one of those things that, but again, a lot of times, maintenance can alleviate that problem, and of course, storing it properly can alleviate that problem, so little TLC goes a long ways and we're talking about, the whole premise of our company is to try to save some money, but for me, it was, I'm lazy, and I got my toys, and when I go home, and I want to just drive. I want my snowmobile, and I want my lawnmower up in Michigan to work, and I want my cars, when I go back to the factory where my cars are, I want them to start, and I don't want to screw with batteries, I don't like them, they're nasty things and stuff, it's, you know, and so I just want my stuff to start. Well, there are some things we can do. Now, what we can't do is stop the companies from making cheaper and cheaper batteries and trying to make them last a couple of years, because they could make a battery that lasts 80 years like that. Now, let's talk about a battery. This is before plastic. You know, this is bakelite and glass. 3 inches of room from the bottom of the plates to the bottom of the glass. Why? So that the lead sulfate that falls down won't short out the plates. Okay. If you look at new batteries, one of the things that it's been a while since I tore it apart. But about 9 years ago, when I was working on the algorithms for the pulsing and stuff, we took and we with a bandsaw, after cleaning out all the sulfuric acid and stuff, we bandsawed them to see how much sulfur we were getting. Because the frequencies, what we're shooting for with pulse is 2 things: reversing, and then the resonant frequency of the lead plates. We're trying to get the plate to vibrate. All it is an ultrasonic vibrator for batteries. But that's not easy to figure out. Nobody tells you that. I've got guys that have come to me and said, oh, I saw a schematic for a pulse charger online. There's lots of them. What they don't tell you is all the different frequencies that you need to put out. You know, they tell you how you can put a frequency out, but not how to pick it. Well, so we tear these things apart and look for the amount of sulfation and stuff. One of the things I saw between a 7-year battery and a 3-year battery, when I cut it apart, and it is the distance between the bottom of the plates on the 7-year battery is about 1/2 inch. The distance between the bottom of the plates on the 3-year-old battery is about 3/16. Okay, well, why? And if you ever looked at the labels when they don't have 7, well, they have prorated 7-year batteries, but they would say, oh, 99.9% pure lead, better plasticizers, hogwash. I mean, and the difference in manufacturing a better PVC for the battery thing and maybe the better lead might be 50 cents, the maximum. I think the number one thing is just the distance on the bottom of the battery plates. They wanted them to short out, and they had it figured out. They know what they're doing. They're not stupid. I mean, they figured out the thickness of the plates down to probably 10,000ths of an inch. I mean, so that they would not last. There are no battery companies that I know that like any of us that are doing high-tech battery chargers that are messing up their formula. They want you to buy a battery every 2 years, period. Not buy one every 5 years. They make a lot more money. And they're billion-dollar corporations and stuff. So it's the exact opposite. It's planned obsolescence. That's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with most of the batteries made. Now, some of the higher priced ones, they're putting a little bit better stuff into the stuff, but then they're making you pay twice as much. So,
Are the gel batteries susceptible to the same thing?
Oh, yeah.
Sulfates in the bottom?
yep, it's exactly the same and stuff. Now, sulfation going to the bottom, no, not as readily because it can't get through the absorbed glass mat. But the absorbed glass mat is a porous thing, so yeah, you know, stuff comes through. But you know, sulfation or the shorting plates happen more readily in a liquid battery, a wet battery, than they do in a gel battery. but again, you're paying more money for a jump battery. So, and for me, it's, what am I using it for? I mean, there are different types of batteries and stuff. You know, we're looking at a motorhome, and they've got these very expensive, you know, 6 batteries in there, and to get the good ones, they're a ton of money, but I'm gonna get good batteries, because for that application, I want the amp hours, and I want AGM. They're the best. They're called lifeline batteries, and they're a whole mess of money. But when you're buying a bus conversion, you know, $5,000 for the batteries.
$5,000?
$5,000. Yeah. So I might get a better deal, but not much. It's not from the.
These electric cars are coming out with, they're all lithium batteries.
Well, no, okay, so now let's talk about lithium, and we make chargers for lithium batteries too and stuff. Now, lithium is a whole different animal. It's got wonderful properties. One, you don't have to keep it charged up. You can let it sit for a year and it won't hurt it. They don't need to be kept at 100%. They don't sulfate, but they do have a thing called dendrites, which are, it's their sulfation that happens to them. Our charger, we use pulsing for that too, but we use it at totally different frequencies in order to slow down the dendrites. But they are a great storage solution. The problem with them is they're expensive. You know, try to get one for a car. As a matter of fact, I make a charger that does these $3,000 lithium batteries for NASCAR and stuff. And so if you're a real expensive racing team, you buy these batteries. Why? They weigh nothing. They are not susceptible to temperature and stuff. So they got that advantage. They weigh nothing. They're 25 pounds less than a lead acid equivalent. Well, 25 pounds might not sound a lot to us, but it's a real whole mess for a race car. You say 25 pounds, it's 25 pounds. And it's hard to break. You know, the vibration and the rigorous temperatures and stuff are not. But you better be able, instead of $150 for your battery, spending $3,000 for a battery. Not all of us can do that, or want to do that. And stuff. Now, if you buy a brand new Ferrari, I understand, and if you buy a new McLaren, they've got lithium batteries in them. You got a $3,000 battery. So again, you want to make sure that you take care of those things. And if somebody will come out with, you know, I get all the battery blogs and stuff that are out there and stuff. And there's going to be some young students in some college somewhere, because they're all working on it, that are going to come out with a better battery technology we got. And I don't know that it's going to be lithium. There's if you Google dirt battery, one of the head MIT professors is saying he can make the battery out of dirt.
Dirt battery?
Dirt, D-I-R-T, dirt. Okay, so okay, maybe he knows something. Somebody is going to go and now lithium. Let's talk about lithium. So I sell lithium jump starters, and I have been for about 4 years. The batteries that are in the lithium jump starters, you don't hear about this, but they're 3 times more powerful than they were 3 years ago. They have a lot more protection. They're cell balanced. They got all these cool things, and for the same size, they've gotten 3 times as powerful. That's why these electric cars can go so much further. Matter of fact, the first Chevy Volt, I think, could go first time 36 miles on the batteries alone. And the new Chevy Volt, I think, goes like 3 times that. Same size batteries, you know, just they've made them better. That's just working on anode and cathode technology and the density of and working with lithium. But there's going to be something. And I hope it's in our lifetime. I like to see it. We're going to get some sort of energy. I don't know whether hydrogen cells will do it. Some other type of battery that will be revolutionary. Whoever comes up with it, whatever school comes up with it, can write their own future, because it'll be billions of dollars. I mean, so you know that every electronic physics department, actually physics is really where it's at, is working on it, because whatever university does that, they get a bunch of bright students in there to figure this stuff out. They're gonna, in Townsend, wow, you know, and that will happen. Everybody's working on it, everybody, and it's just a matter of time. We're going to see some pretty cool stuff in batteries. Whether it affects our hobby or whether it affects us directly, I don't know. I don't like electric cars per se. I like internal combustion. I like the ambient. You know, there was a professor, a Stanford professor, says, well, gas cars it's gonna avalanche and they'll be all gone in 10 years. Here's a professor, real smart guy. Well, he doesn't even own a car. He doesn't know the passion of driving a car, the fun of driving a car, how it's part of your life. He doesn't get it. He's out there because he's never, he doesn't have a car. He doesn't, so no, it's not gonna happen in 10 years. We're not gonna, it's gonna be like all of a sudden it'll be all electric. And then there'll be no cars. It'll be all Uber and stuff. And to a certain extent, actually, like my kids are in their 30s, and high 20s, and my daughter likes cars. My grandson loves cars, but my two boys, it's an embarrassment. And I used to take them to all the cars. Maybe it's because I took them to car events, but they didn't have it. I mean, I was born wanting a car. I mean, I made noise. I needed it. It's got a motor in it. I love it. It's sad to see that that's probably going to change, but it's not going to happen in 10 years. The cars are going to be cool forever.
Not in our lifetime.
Yeah, right.
Well, most of the people that are in the car culture are good drivers because they're into cars. And most of the people that are bad drivers are just a car is a means of getting from point A to point B.
Right.
They look at their cell phone and surf the web while they're driving.
For one of my sons, it's a large garbage can.
Right.
I mean, that's a whole different. I'm glad I was born in a period of time when we got to enjoy and still continue to enjoy these wonderful things. 100 years from now, I'm sure it'll be different. But
It's going to be different.
were we lucky? I have all my fondest memories. Somehow, are around cars, and all my friends are car people. And that's another wonderful thing, because you know who they are, and they think like you, and they're honest people and stuff.
Looked around here and I think we all grew up in the best of times, 50s, 60s, maybe
Yeah.
some 70s in here.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of newer cars you see out there now.
Yeah. Anyway, well, any other questions?
You said it's too hot, too cold is bad for batteries. Is there an optimal temperature for lead acid batteries to live in?
Yeah, about 70, 80.
78.
Yeah.
So bring the batteries in the winter when you park the car.
Yeah, right. I mean, again, if you're in a real cold area and you're not using it, it takes a little bit of.
It's pretty cold.
Yeah, right. So you bring him in. You bring him in and then you can. There's nothing wrong with daisy chain and making little small wire cables that can jump your 3 or 4 batteries together. I do it all the time and stuff, and I have one charger on all 4 of those, and it's pulsing them and keeping them alive. So, and even if you have Brand X's and the other ones, and as long as they're powerful enough, I'd say 5 amps would be a good one. And automatic, you can put 4 batteries together, put all the reds and all the negatives together. Now, what you don't want to mix is AGM batteries and lead acid cells. You can mix small and big, no problems there. But you wet cells together and AGM batteries together, and they can be small or big. And you put them in parallel, and you put them in your shop. And the other thing too, okay, you don't have to worry about sticking a battery on a concrete floor.
That's old wise years ago.
Yeah, that came from when batteries.
And a rubber case.
Well, okay, before rubber, when they were made out of wood.
Wood.
First batteries, before they even went to glass, the first batteries were made out of wood and stuff. And I happen to have a collection of vintage battery chargers, and I've got a few batteries and stuff that are. I got one wood. Not partially left, I mean, because they put tar inside them in order to insulate the cells and stuff. And now, there, you can leach electrons from one cell to another if you've got a wood battery. If you're not running on wood, however, as soon as you go to glass or any other insulator, or especially today, you're not going to do anything other than temperature. Now, the only reason I would take something off the ground is if the temperature was really cold, colder, and usually on the ground it is, but the difference between the ground and rock directly, it's not that much. And or hot, but other than that, no, you're not. The battery doesn't go dead faster. Nothing happens to a battery. It's PVC. It's the same stuff that I'm building a new garage right now, and they're putting the lines in and they're underground. It's PVC. It's not going to be affected by anything.
What vintage is the glass battery?
I think that's about 85. And what that was either on a farm, it was one cell out of, if you had place, a farm or something like that, before we got power lines, you would have a bank of those. They're 2 volts each, so you might put 20 of them together. You would have them wired up to your light bulbs and your things that you run at night. And you would either have a windmill with a generator on it and stuff, or you have one of those single lung, pumpers, just pump it away during the day while you're generating electricity, and you're running on DC stuff. And that's how switching stations had them. There's a variety of things they used them on.
They were back up.
Yeah, and now, of course, there's still batteries out there in those places. They're not made out of glass anymore, but this is before you had glass, that's what they did. Now, they built these to rebuild. I took a car tour up in Northern California to a big train depot. And diesel trains, the diesel runs a generator. The generator charges up the batteries, and that's how you get your train to work. It's not just diesel direct; it's diesel to batteries. But the batteries are this big. And one of the things that they showed at the train depot is they still pull the battery plates up with a big crane, and they clean them. And they rebuild them. They used to rebuild batteries. They were called tar top batteries if they were car batteries and stuff. And they rebuilt all these. Nobody thought about, and the plates were thick. Nobody thought about obsolescence. You wanted to make it last. So what do? You clean them. Now, back then, I'm sure they knew what they were doing when they were cleaning the plates, or they would burn through everything that they got. And but that's what you did. You didn't throw stuff away. It could last. And those big train batteries, I asked the guy, and he goes, "Oh, they're about $15,000 bucks." And it's a lead acid battery, just a bunch of lead, a bunch of plates and stuff, but they don't throw them.
Years ago, the telephone company, their central office, had a room they called a power room. These things were like a 55-gallon drum, clear, and they were maintainable batteries.
Yeah.
They had 48-volt DC, back up the entire switch. Back then, it was before electronics.
Right.
It was an electric switch.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, storage is storage, and it's been around a long time. That's why, like I say, with a lot of people don't know that generators put out 2 voltages. They don't know that alternators put out 2 voltages, but they see that. I mean, when you start a car and it goes to 14.4, that's not, they can't leave it there very long. But that's on purpose to make bubbles. The reason they do that is for bubbles. It's gassing the battery.
Can you jump start a 6-volt with a 12-volt?
No.
Not at all.
Okay, I get guys that buy my jump starters and they do that. I'm not one with heights and tie ropes. If you're fortunate and you don't have anything turned on, and the voltage of the 6-volt battery is low enough, when you put a 12-volt onto a 6-volt, like a jump box, it will come out to around 8 volts. Okay, with the 6 volts down to 4 or something like that. Okay, that sounds reasonable, right? So you try to start it, it starts. As soon as you start it, however, and your generator starts putting in some excess stuff, you'll spike up to 12 volts. And if you've got anything on that's running on 6 that is all of a sudden spiked up to 12, you're going to burn it up. So it's
Whatever's on the motor.
What I tell people to do, and this is what I do when I got a 6-volt car, I bought myself a spare Optimus 6-volt battery. And if you want to see what one looks like, I have one in the booth. And it's awesome because it will run my car. It's half the size of a normal battery, puts out a ton of amps, and I can put it in the trunk. And if I have a problem with a 6-volt car, I can either, and it's really bad, the battery's really bad, just take the other battery out, put this thing in and stuff, and bungee it in place because it's smaller than my normal battery. And I got myself a 6-volt battery. I can use a set of jumper cables with it and jump the other battery. And I'm never screwing around with anything higher that would hurt anything, including, obviously, the coil, the condenser, and those kind of things. They don't want 12 volts on. They just, So.
However, there are 9-volt batteries, they were surprised when I didn't realize that.
Yeah, my 6-volt cars are 6-volt cars. I left them 6 volts. I have an Optima in one of them because it's a hard starting car. And you can actually put 2 Optimas in the same space. So if you got yourself a big Packard or something old car that's 6 volts. You put 2 of those, you could weld with them. I mean, they're just, you know, you've got over 1,000 cold cranking amps, and so that's another alternative to going to 8 volts. As soon as you go to 8 volts, well, you got to change things, and then you got to worry about your light bulbs are made for 6 volts. So if you're going to tour, and I like to tour, you wouldn't want to run 8 volts on a bunch of 6 volt light bulbs for a long time. They're going to burn out. You know, so you're changing light bulbs a lot more than you used to. So,
You go touring with a 6 volt car?
huh?
You go touring with a 6 volt?
Oh, I've done, I'm a pretty crazy, stupid person, but I like it. So I bought, this is about 8 years ago, I bought a Bel Air, a 54 Bel Air at Hershey. I drove it back to California.
On 6 volt?
It is a 6 volt car, it's 54. Yeah, so, anyway, thank you. And I think we have somebody else coming. But thank you very much for showing up. If you didn't get a piece of literature,